We need a clapboard.
Yeah, you need a. Well, my name is Res Sarno, and the first name that my parents gave me was Erasto, Erasto. But I had to change that because people having a hard time reading my name or pronouncing my name. Okay, this war story begins on December 7, 1941. I don't know what day that was, so probably you can find out what day that was in a particular year, in that particular year. And I was the we were a family of 7 children at that time, and I was the fifth. And there were 5 of us going to school. I was the youngest because I recall I must be in first grade at that time. And we would go to our school, walk to our school about probably 4 kilometers away. And I remember that day we were in class, and since it was December 7, everybody was thinking about Christmas because vacation time is about to come in just a few more days. So we were all in class about probably mid-morning. We were having our classroom activities, and all of a sudden our teacher came and spoke with little urgency, and we could sense that something was really important and very, very serious. So she said that Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese Air Force, and that America has declared war against the Japanese. And so our teacher said, class will be dismissed, and you have to go home because this war is going to be a very serious one. According to common knowledge, only one bomb dropped in the big city of Manila can melt it down. And that's how they were imagining how powerful these bombs are. So we all got scared, and we were in the verge of crying almost. I, particularly being the youngest of in our family with kids, I had to rush out of the room and try to look for my sisters and brother, because I don't know how to go home by myself. I had to be with them because they know the way. I was the youngest. So I couldn't find them, and I was crying already, I remember. And finally, after a little while, we found each other and we ran home, only to find that our parents were already preparing. They have big granny sacks, and they were putting in rice, food, and the pots and pans. They are putting them all in there. And we have a relative who was a young man already, and he was helping our parents to pack up all those things. But it was so surprising that when I looked at the back of our house, there was an empty lot there with a lot of coconut trees, and on the ground, I saw soldiers just sitting down, relaxing, filling up the whole compound behind our house. And they were cleaning their guns, they were sharpening their bayonets, and just, I don't know, they were probably just waiting for orders there. A whole company of them there. That really scared us all. So that same evening, we walked out of our house. Our house is, since we are staying there at the outer fringes of of town, our house is one of the biggest there in that area, because our house is a two-story building, and we had to leave everything behind, and we went to the edge of town, into the forest, under those tall big trees, I remember. And for the evening, we laid mats on the ground, and we just tried to sleep on the mats with nothing covering us. But pretty soon it started raining, so we had to get the mats out and put it above us so that it will cover us from the rain. So we had to lay on the ground, and which was very difficult, because we couldn't sleep. There are a lot of ants, a lot of insects crawling all over, and wow, that was a hard night for all of us. And pretty soon the following day, we saw a lot of town folks coming out and joining us there in the forest. Pretty soon the word came that the Japanese have landed in the northern part of the islands, and that they are going south towards us. And because we live in this province of Bataan, it's a peninsula, and the tip of it guards the opening of the China Sea into the Manila Bay. That's where, and the tip of the peninsula is here, and the Manila Bay is around here, and China Sea is over on the west. So what I remember was we had a hard night there, and the following day we had to walk going south, because the Japanese forces are up north and they are headed south, and we have to retreat. In between us, between the Japanese and the people, is the Philippine Army, who are trying to defend. But as the Japanese Army moves forward to the south, or down toward the south, the Philippine Army had to retreat, and we had to retreat even further south. So those are the things that we faced, and that is the month of December. And from December, January, February until April, we were there in the boondocks. And the very first time that we had to get out of that place, in the first uh, area that we settled from town, we had to go down south, further south, deeper into the forest, and carrying all of our bags and our sacks and all those things. And we didn't know where we were really going. We just had to keep walking with the crowd and with our neighbors with us. It was it was difficult to, you are up in the mountains, and you don't know where you will get your water, where you will get your when you will be able to cook your food and eat and or sleep. So that was the time when we got out of town, and those are the few nights that we I could recall. Then the succeeding uh, retreats that we had to make, I remember we had to cross a rice field, rice paddies, and as we were single filing and walking on the ridges between the rice paddies, there's a Japanese airplane who flew by very low. We could even see the pilot very low, and started firing the machine guns towards us. Pop, 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 pop. And we had to dive right on the rice paddy ground to hide ourselves. And good enough, nobody was hit. So we were thinking probably those are not machine guns. They were just probably firecrackers or something like that, because nobody was hit, fortunately. So we had to keep on walking, and until we get to a place that we think we would be able to spend the night safe enough, covered by trees and vegetations, bamboos, like that. And we kids were not too mindful of what was really going on. We would play in between the bamboo groves, in between, because they're clearing, and we would play hide and seek, in the evening, and we would uh, uh, play different games uh, at night, and not thinking much about what's going on in the war. And I remember one night we had to pack up and go again, and we had to walk. I don't know how long, but we went through sugarcane plantations, and for some reason I myself made a wrong turn, and I got lost myself. And I when I realized I was all alone by myself in the middle of the sugarcane uh, field, nobody was with me. I had to really cry out as loud as I can so I could be heard. And after a little while, they found me, and we went on to our destination. And it was bright that night, I recall. The moon was shining very brightly, and we arrived at a certain place. They had some huts there, but they were empty. So we thought, oh, this is a good place, and we can sleep here tonight. Beside that place is a river, And on the other side of the river is a bank, an embankment with big rocks, big boulders of stone and rocks. And so we said, wow, this is good. At least we have some place to stay. And our folks started cooking, but we made sure that the smoke, you know, from the fire that we make, don't uh, attract or show up beyond those tall trees, because they say that, oh, the Japanese can see where people are because they see some smoke coming up, because there must be fire or cooking or something. So we tried to keep things low. And boy, I tell you, pretty soon there was an airplane that swooped down very close to us and dropped a bomb. And the bomb dropped on the other side of the river, and it hit those big boulders. And you see the shrapnel, the impact is here, and the shrapnels go this way, upwards. And because it hit on the other side, we were on the right trajectory of those shrapnels. And I remember after the bomb exploded, the whole place was so dusty and we could not see each other. It's dark already. We could not see each other. And when the dust settled down and things cleared up, we found out that the mother of the family with us was hit. She was at that time when the bomb dropped, she was at that time feeding her twin boys. She had twin boys and she was feeding them outside of the hut. And when the bomb dropped, all she could do was grab her twins and kneel down with one knee on the ground and the other knee up like that. And so when the shrapnel came, it hit her right here on the groin, hitting her main artery, her femoral artery. And so she started bleeding right then and there. And she died right there and there after that explosion. So what we did was just made a little hole or a depression or a ditch on the ground, and we just buried her there, left her there. And we walked on and left that place. It was so gloomy. I tell you, I could see how sad we were. Even the kids were affected. So scared. So we walked on, and we would reach different places in the forest, and we had to do this retreating sequences probably about 5 times or 7 times as we went along down south. And finally, when the army said, well, we will put all of you civilians at the very tip of the peninsula. We have a nice camp for you there. All the civilians can be kept down there, and we are up here on the mountain, and you are down below near the sea, and you will be safe there. So all the civilians were gathered there, and we, every family had to gather sticks and things like that, build our own little huts, and just settle there, not knowing how long we will stay there. I cannot even remember, even now, I cannot recall how or where we got our food. Of course, we brought some rice, we bought some canned salmon and things like that, canned stuff. But since I was that young, I could not recall how things went to feed our big family. uh, we There is one thing that kept happening with us as we retreated from one place to another until we get to that final camp, when we called, and the army called that the best camp, because they said it is quite well protected, and we are on the other side of the slope of the mountains. So because my father was a politician before, he was engaged in politics, and his political party was suspected as pro-Japanese. So every time we settled in one place in the forest, my father was picked up by the intelligence people of the army and questioned, taken to their headquarters and questioned. But he would be returned that same night or the following day, something like that. But when we reached final camp, the best camp, they picked him up and took him up to the mountain to their headquarters. So we were down there for a month. We didn't have our father with us, and which I couldn't recall how we survived, because mother was, with all the kids. I don't know how we survived the place. We built a little house, a little hut, and our flooring is just about a foot from the ground. And that's where we stayed. And in front of us is the more of the passageway of the camp. So people pass by, and up in the mountain there is a colored man who works in the headquarters of the army, and he would come down from the headquarters, top of the mountain, go down and pass by our hut. And we would ask him about our father, because he was up there in the headquarters. And then he said, no, he's okay, he's up there, he's just confined with some other people. So, okay. And disease was all over the place. Dysentery, cholera, I think. And almost every day, you could see some people going in front of our little hut with dead bodies to be buried somewhere farther out. Almost every day, someone comes around or passes by our house. And what really I could remember so strongly was, the people had to build latrines where they could move their and it's not very far from our place, from our hut. So boy, the stink of the whole thing, we could sense where we live. And when we even go there, I don't know how we were able to keep ourselves from falling into the pit. Whew, there's a big hole two pieces of branches of, you know, pieces of wood, and that's where you step and you poo right there, drop there. And when you look down, you don't see the poo, you see white stuff. They're all maggots crawling all over the top. And the flies are just, whew, you have, we would hold our plate like that with some food in there. The flies would come out almost covering your plate. Those are the real icky things that I remember so bad. People dying almost every day, and all these sanitary places were so, wow, terrible. Okay, so we stayed in that camp for about a month, and every time, as I mentioned, this colored man who works up in the headquarters up in the mountain would come by and tell us about how our father was doing up there. And he kept telling us, yes, he is there and he's confined with other prisoners. So the time came, that was April 9. April 9. So check what day that is, okay?
What year?
1942. April 9, 1942. The American forces declared surrender. They surrendered to the Japanese forces. So that evening, the American forces burned all of their ammunition, everything that they have up there in the mountain above us. Burned them all up. All kinds of small arm ammunition to bombs and whatnot. And the whole night long, I tell you, the whole place, the whole night was so bright and so loud. And explosions, the whole thing. They burned all of their ammunition so that the Japanese would not make use of them when they surrender. So that night we were so afraid so much that we had to crawl on the ground under our hut, which the floor is just about a foot from the ground. We squeezed in through because we wanted to hide, and that went for several hours in that night. Towards morning, we were still there, almost sleeping probably, or had fallen asleep while we were on the ground. I heard a voice, and the voice was my father. He was released from the headquarters, and all of them were released, and he told us later that each of the prisoners were given a rifle. He said, here, our forces have surrendered. You go down to your families, and here's the rifle. You protect yourself as you go down the mountain to your families. So he said, no, I don't need the rifle. So he came down, and the first thing, among all those explosions, I heard my father calling my name. Hey, I said, Tata is here. Tata is here. So we get out of from under the hut, and he told us the armed forces, the American forces, have surrendered already. He said, so we can get out of this camp. So that at the moment we got out of there, we started gathering our stuff and put them in little sacks. I remember very well. We have a very thick Tagalog Bible. And we didn't know because we were all having malaria. We were all shaking. We were all sick. And we were saying we probably cannot carry this Bible anymore. It's so heavy. You know, we preferred to bring food rather than the Bible. We left it there. That is one thing that I remember we should not have done. We left the Bible as we walked out. When the morning came, everybody walked out of that camp and out to the highway. And that is where the Death March started. The famous Death March started when everybody walked and all the captured soldiers walked out into the highway. One side, on the right side of the highway, going north, going back, are the soldiers, the captured soldiers. On the other side, on the left side, are the civilians. They're walking together like that towards the north, while the soldiers have their guards, Japanese guards. We could see guards, Japanese soldiers going up and down and watching all the soldiers. We were coming single file, sort of, and all of a sudden, we were a little bit ahead. All of a sudden, we heard our oldest brother says, Mom, come here. Dad was run over by a car. So what he did was, when he was carrying a little sack of rice, and my younger sister, who was sick already, she was edematous, anasarcos, beriberi. You see, that's what during those times have. He was carrying a sack of rice and my sister on his shoulder. So he wanted to fix the rice. So he leaned at the back. Here is the road, and here's the mountainside. So he leaned on the mountain and extended his feet like this while he was fixing the sack, and he laid down my sister beside him. And here came a car, a Japanese car loaded, occupied by Japanese officials, ran over his legs. And that is when my brother, our eldest brother, ran ahead to warn us, to tell us that Dad was run over by a car. So we walked back. When we walked back, we saw that he was laid on a stretcher already, a very narrow stretcher. And his legs were already splinted and bandaged. I said, at least, the Japanese soldiers, officers, took care of him. So he was straight like this, and his legs were, and fortunately, the bones broke, but not the skin. The skin was intact. So there was no wound. So no infection could set in. But all four bones in the legs were broken. So he got a splint like that. He was lying on the stretcher. The following morning, so when we saw him, and the Japanese car had left and people, so he was left there. My sister, that he was caring for, was hit by the bumper of the car, thrown about 6 feet away from him, and she died right then and there. So we saw a hole on the side of the mountain. We just wrapped our sister and we just shoved her inside that hole. We left her there. So on the following morning, we took our father from this side of the road. The road is here. He was here. And there was a clearing on the other side of the road. So we took him there and placed him in a level ground clearing. And the following morning, he said, "You come over here and let us pray. And I want you all to go on home, because if we stay here, we will all die here." That's what he said. And while we were praying like that, I remember zing, zing, boom, boom, a lot of bombs exploding all over. I could see, and I remember seeing a coconut tree, some kind of a missile hitting that coconut tree, and the whole thing, leaves and fruit and everything, falling down. And we were down here, and my father was on a stretcher, and we were circling around him, and we were praying. He says, "Let us pray before you go, because we cannot stay here. We will all die here if we stay here." So he said, "I will stay here with our eldest brother," and he was sick also, because he has a big infection in his finger and he could not hold things, you see. And he was shaking also with malaria. But somebody has to care for him. So he says, he's going to stay with me and the rest of you go home. My mother was pregnant at that time, and we were small kids, from the smallest, one after another like that. It was April. That's the height of summer. And the roads are not paved. The dust of the road is up to it's like snow, like a thick snow drift like that, and you sink, and the dust is up to our knees. And that's hot. Red dust of the mountain, of the mountain road. So, all right, after the prayer, all those zing, all those bullets coming through. Wow. So, what can we do? We just have to leave him there. We did not leave him any single centavo, not even a single peso or what. I had nothing. They were not carrying anything except the clothes on their bodies. We left them there, and we started walking towards the north, going home. Just a short distance, we couldn't do it anymore. I remember I cried a lot because it was so hot, and we don't know how we can walk home that way. So we settled down. We sat down on the side of the road. After a little ways, we sat down a little. We saw a log on the side of the road. We sat there. My mom, brother, sister, my sister, because there are only two brothers, oldest brother and myself. And while we were there, all of a sudden there's a truck which parked right in front of us. Stopped right there. And the driver came down, went past by us, went at the back. I think he he wanted to pee. So he went there. And my older sister, Miriam, uh, talked to him when he was on the way back, going back to the truck. He talked to him. I don't know what. Most likely, my sister talked to him in English, because my sister is older already, and evidently the driver must have known a little English. So after a little talk, just okay, okay. He said that we can go in his truck. We can ride in his truck. Oh boy, we were so happy. So the moment he said that, we climbed up the truck. We threw our luggage there inside, but all the other civilians who were walking on the same side of the road saw us climbing, so they also threw all of their luggage, and they wanted to also to join us up there. But the driver came down from his seat and says, out, 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 out. Only our family and another neighbor family stayed in his truck. That, to me, is a very, very definite miracle. I don't know why. Wow, how he knew that just our family could stay. So after he got all of them out, he went back to his seat, started his engine, and all of a sudden, all the luggage and people came up again. And we were all, covered almost by the luggage that people threw in. And we were all crying. We were shouting. So the driver came down again. He got a piece of wood like this, a piece of branch. He hit them all off. I remember seeing one man just falling off the truck because he must have been kind of sick or something. He was hit. So he became unconscious and fell off the truck. Until, again, our two families were left in the truck. So after that, they didn't try anymore. So the truck took us to our town. And when we got there, we told the driver, we invited the driver to our house, because while we were in the mountain, we could look down on the town, see our house is still standing, because since it was a big house, they made it into a headquarters for the Japanese soldiers. So we thought the house was still there. So we told them, our house is still there. Yeah, but he said, no, we burned your house also. So he said, there's no house standing there anymore. But he knew where it was. He took us in front of the house. And when we got there, we saw the walls, the cement walls. And the roof collapsed right inside the walls. And so there is a little roofing there. So when we get down from his truck, we just went and crawled underneath, and we spent the night there when we arrived home. And he left. So the following day, we had to go to the edge of Manila Bay, because Bataan is a peninsula, Manila Bay is here. This is China China Sea on the west. So we had to go there because we wanted to go to the province of our father, which is east of us. on the other side of Manila Bay. So we had to go to the edge, to the shore, Manila Bay, and pick up a boat so we can cross Manila Bay, and then from there travel again where our destination was, where the old place of my father, of my grandfather, they lived there. So we went there. Following morning, and the boats were so loaded that I could remember the boat were just sticking up from the water level about this much only. But you see, Manila Bay was so quiet, it was so peaceful, was so because summertime there's not much turbulence in the weather. So even though the boat is just sticking out, this we were able to cross. And after we landed on the other side, we took a horse rig and took us over to the other town where our grandparents lived, and they welcomed us there, and all the townspeople were there waiting for us when we got there, and they were all crying, they were all amazed. He says, here are the survivors of the war. Here are the survivors, and we all look. There's nothing. We were not able to carry anything practically. So that's where we stayed. So what happened to my father and my brother that we left behind? That's another story. Because the moment we left them there, and this story was what they related to us when they joined us later on. Okay? So they said that when we left them there, 4 men approached my father, who is on the stretcher, and he says, "Sir, we can carry you, and all you have to do or say is that we are your relatives." They are actually soldiers, Philippine Army soldiers, pretending to be civilians. They're trying to avoid capture, you see. And so they volunteered to carry my father, because then they asked my father that if the Japanese soldiers were asked who these 4 guys are, my father is supposed to tell them that they are his relatives, not soldiers, not. So he said, "Okay, sure, take me." So he was carried by these 4 men to the next town. But when they felt that probably they could escape already and they are pretty safe already, they left him there in the next town. They disappeared, and my father was left there by the roadside, and my brother. So they had to ask for food from all these civilians who were passing by and trying to go home. So food, water, whatever. And so they were left there, and the next thing that they had to do was inside or further inside by the side of the road was a little hut, and they said they could stay there. So my brother asked some people to help him take my father there. At least there is a little hut and there's a roof, but under the hut is a pit that they call a bomb shelter. That is, they dig it up so that when the bomb explodes around, they could go down there. So they stayed there that night, but in the early part of the night they heard boom, boom, just thumping sound around them. They could understand, but towards the morning, those things that dropped early in the evening started to explode. There were actually time bombs, they call at that time. There's a timer and that explodes after a little while. So my brother didn't know what to do. So there's a pit there, and my father was on the stretcher. And so my father said, lower me down, head first. Because you see, he's in a stretcher, and if the end where his feet are is lowered, he would not be able to support himself because of his problem. So he said, lower my head first. So you can imagine that his head is down there, and his legs sticking out this way. And he remained there for several hours until all those explosive materials were done. And again, he ran outside by the side of the road, asked for people to help him. And he lay there holding on to the siding, to the pole of the stretcher to support himself, so that he's not gonna get his head smashed down at the bottom. So he was able to get out. Now the next thing to do is, what next? So my brother would go out to the roadside and look for people who could help. Finally, he saw an old man who was riding on his carabao pulling a cart. You see, people are supposed to go up north, and that's what the Japanese soldiers were ordering. Nobody could go back. Nobody could go south. Everybody has to go north. That's the way the order is. Anybody who will go down will be shot. And there is an old man. He was riding this carabao bull cart going south. So my brother spoke to him, and eventually he agreed to put my father's stretcher on his cart, take him to the next town, north. So it was very hard. My father was saying it was so hard because, the cart is not rubber wheels, don't have rubber wheels. They have wooden and steel wheels, and rugged road, so bumpy. And these things were just too sensitive. And they were, by that time, the thing was so swollen already. And cyanotic, very blue already. So he said, oh, that was really about to kill him. But anyway, they got to the next town. And the next assignment was what to do next. So again, as usual, my brother would go to the side of the road, talk with civilians, and ask for food, and see what they could do for our father. And for some miraculous thing, he was able to talk. I mean, a Japanese truck stopped right there in front of him, and he talked to him. And the Japanese soldiers, he was going south though. He says, "I'll come back. I'll pick you up." Oh, so my father and brother was, oh, good, good. At least we'll finally reach home, reach our town, because it's a truck. But they kept waiting, waiting for the whole day. Next day, he didn't show up. But my brother had to go to the side of the road, just wait there and see what happened. All of a sudden, the truck came by again. Oh, he says, I'm sorry. So you're still here. I'll pick you up tonight. He says, I'm just going south and I'll come back. And sure enough, he showed up. So after he was picked up by the Japanese driver in his truck, so he was able to reach home. And again, the following morning, he had to go to this towards the Manila Bay shore to cross the same way where what we did before, because he wanted, of course, to go home. In the meantime, that all of this was happening to him, back where my grandparents lived, and we were there, and we were his house was not very big, and all of us were having malaria, and we were almost every morning we would be shaking, and then we would develop fever, something like that. And the small house seems to shake also, because all of us were shaking with malaria. But in the meantime that my father was trying to come back to our town, my grandfather and relatives would go out to the main highway and ask people who appear to have escaped the war areas. They would ask about, have you seen a man in his stretcher or something like that? Just trying to find out, and if there is any news, have you seen any a body like that on your way home or something like that? No, 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 no. Nobody had seen a man with that description. So everybody in his hometown were just alerted when finally my father arrived. You see, when they were able to cross, they didn't have any money. So the boatman just took them across the bay for free. And when they reached the other side of the bay, they took a horse rig, and they were taken to their house, to their hometown, for free also, because they didn't have a cent. All of these were just miraculous things that happened to them. And when my father arrived, the whole town, I tell you, people just gathered there and carried him to our house. All right, so when he reached home, the following day he had to be taken to Manila, and he was taken to the hospital there, St. Luke's Hospital, Old St. Luke's. And out there, they tried to manipulate his legs without anesthesia. So he peed and even pooed because of the pain that he had. And they put him in a cast. From there up to here, both legs. So when he came back from the hospital, he was both cast. So he was lying in bed. Every day, the whole day almost, people would visit him, and he would tell the whole story over and over again. Every time they would visit, people are there and he would tell the whole story, whatever happened to us. And after a week, he fell into a coma. He just went to sleep. And he was not eating. We could not feed him. He put something and he chokes. But we could call his name. When his folks would call his name, he would also respond that way. Only he would hear, and he could not talk. So I called physicians, doctors. Many doctors had come, but still the same thing. So his folks put a white mosquito net over him and decorated it with flowers, thinking that he was about to die. At that time, my grandmother, his mother, had been praying. He said, Lord, this son of mine has a lot of children, and his children will need him. Please save him. And if it is necessary, you can take me. That's his mother's prayer. Take me in place of my son, because he has many children, and his children will need him. And 6 months later, that old woman died. She turned jaundiced, became yellow, and died. But my father survived. After all the physicians were called, we cannot wake him up. He won't wake up. But somebody suggested, hey, he said, there is one doctor there, somewhere in another town. Let's try him, let's call him. So they called him. Wow, when he came, he has white hair, very old already. White hair, white coat, white pants, white shoes. To me, he looked like an angel. When I saw him, he was so tall. He's not the regular Filipino feature. He's very like a mestizo, we call, like a Spanish, So he came, he got a bag, and he got some medicine, kind of milky white medicine. He asked for a teaspoon, so he put it, and he opened my father's mouth and poured in that, just like milk of magnesia to me. And then he got an ampule, broke it off, put it in the syringe, and gave him a shot. And then he left. We were trying to pay him, but he wouldn't take any payment. He left. In 1 hour's time, my father woke up. So then he started telling his stories all over again, over and over. And then he got well, and we all got well. And that's when we had to start life all over again. And when we look back, there is no question that it was God who gave us all the miracles. Every step of the way was a miracle. Our own as a family, and my father and his brother in their own way also. That's all those things happened, and I know it is God's miracle all along. So after my father got well, we moved to another house all by ourselves. We kids would sell my sisters, older sisters, would sell tomatoes. We'd put in big broad baskets, and we could put on top of their heads, sell tomatoes, and also some dried fish. And that's how we tried to earn a living at that time. But I was not doing anything. I just carry stuff for them. So we would go to a cockfighting arena because there is one there. And every Sunday a lot of people do a lot of betting and cockfighting in there, and my sisters would be carrying those things and would go around the bleachers and things like that, and would be selling tomatoes and dried fish. And I was there, so I could watch a cockfight because I was just a helper for them. And that's how we lived. And pretty soon, when my father was strong enough and times were already peaceful, we went back to Bataan, to our hometown, and built a house there near the church. That's how we got our lives back. And I would say that it was good that my father had to separate from his own family, because his own family became Church of Christ, no longer Adventist, and it is only my father who remained an Adventist, because he married my mother, who's already an Adventist, a school teacher during that time. So I was thinking, he's like Abraham. He was called by God out of that. He says, you are still living close to your relatives, and your relatives are idolaters and idol worshippers. So come out, go over to another place. That's how I think what happened to my father. And that's why we are in the Adventist faith. And in spite of that, in spite of the fact that his whole family, brothers, sisters, and parents, were of the different faith. Actually, their religion, Church of Christ, is an offshoot of the Adventist. They used to be Adventist before, but they took off, followed the other one who was already asked to leave the faith because of some mischief that he did. Build a little hut. We never missed a worship time at night. Yeah, that is one point that I missed to tell you, because every time at evening we'd gather the whole family, we'll have worship. And my mother has memorized, and we were all memorized that song. What's the word of that song? Ano na yan? Oh, abide with me. Oh, that's right.
Oh yeah.
Abide with me. Yeah. That was our, more or less, our theme song.
Ah.
And we all memorized that because we didn't have songbooks with us. We just kept singing the same song. Abide with me. But one of the big mistakes that I think happened to us is when we left that Bible, because it appeared that we were more concerned about our food rather than the Bible. And when we got out of that camp, bang, that accident happened to my father and started the whole thing. So that is in essence the war story that we went through. 4 months from December, actually 5 months, up to April, early April, April 9, December 7, April 9. And so every time April 9 comes around, our family just remembers the time when we were liberated and got into freedom that time. But all the while, we cannot explain how we survived, except that the Lord led us and did all His miracles for us. Okay,